Hey everyone, how are we doing? Welcome to everyone in the chat. I know some people are still entering. It's really great to see so many names, some familiar ones, some new ones, and I always love people giving introductions of where they're coming from and giving a local weather report. Um, I'm speaking from Reading, kind of sunny, bit cold, but not as cold as I'm sure it will be in the coming weeks. So yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for joining today. My name is Miles Dyer, and I am CyberSafe's content development manager in marketing. Just a bit of background about me. I've been with CyberSafe since March, um, and I've always been a huge advocate for the power of online video. And I've been grateful to have the opportunity since joining here to help with events like PeepSec. For those of you that are on LinkedIn or Twitter, may have seen our weekly show, CyberSafe Weekly, which I host and produce. And when I'm not hosting on webinars, I'm actually behind the scenes producing them. But for today, I'm producing and hosting. So hopefully this will all go smoothly. If not, only one person to blame. And yeah, and just a bit more background about me. With what I've done with video, I'm an old school YouTuber. Back in 2006, I started as a vlogger at the age of 18. All these years later, almost 36 years old. And I've always experimented with the platform to see how it can be used as a vehicle for social change around education, mental health, activism. And I've worked with YouTube, the UN, BBC, lots of media organizations around digital citizenship, which includes things like critical thinking and cybersecurity. And so having an opportunity to work with CyberSafe has been wonderful because I just love having conversations. I love to learn and do what I can as a part of a wider team to help make society become more resilient with all the challenges that we face in this digital age. And obviously today, as a part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we are talking about how you can reduce human cyber risk in your organization. And for those of you that may have to drop out at any point, don't worry about it, because this webinar will be available to watch on demand afterwards and comes with our new ebook, which is called Security Awareness is Dead or Dying, which you can see here, and it will be linked in an email afterwards with a link to this video on replay, and that will obviously go out to everyone who registers to any of our webinars. Just as a bit of housekeeping, please feel free to join the live conversation in the chat to the right of this. And if you have any questions, we actually have a Q&A tab that you can use. If you do have a question, do use the Q&A tab, because it means we can bring them on screen. And although we'll be collating them throughout and having a Q&A session at the end, what often happens in these webinars is we find actually these questions are really good in real time, and we'll actually bring them into the conversation throughout. So please just keep asking away. We love to hear from you. And we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. So, security awareness is dead, or is it? To help me discuss this topic today, I am thrilled to be joined by two awesome guests who I had the pleasure of working with on PeepSec earlier this year. First, we have Kerry Jones. And Kerry is the head of security awareness and community for the Lego Group. Very jealous. What an awesome company to work for. With over 10 years of experience specializing in people-centered security and security awareness. Kerry has also maintained a focus on positive security and positive language. And we are also joined by Shaq Welsh, security culture and awareness analyst at Tide. Now, Shaq is security culture and awareness analyst for Tide, who studied law, worked in the anti-financial crime and KYC space, and was Met Police Special Constable, and more recently was recognized as a rising star in the Women in FinTech Power List 2020. I'm now going to bring them on screen now. So, Shaq, Kerry, are you there?
Hello.
Hello, Kerry. And are you there, Shaq? You just need to unmute. Well, I'll start with you, Kerry, while we just get Shaq's video online. Just as a bit of an additional introduction, just tell us about what you do, and more importantly, why you do it. Jack?
So yeah, I work for the Lego Group, and I've been there for about 6 months, so not too long. And previous to working at the Lego Group as the head of security awareness and community, I used to work at NatWest Bank, where I was also the head of security awareness. I had a small time with a company called Vivida as well. But previous to those things, was the worked in people-centered security in the socio-technical security group at the National Cybersecurity Centre, where I researched people and security for 8.5 years. So the documents, if you've seen, that have come out of the NCSC, such as the password guidance, the phishing guidance, the random things, I have been in the background to a number of those pieces of work, helping my colleagues and build that sort of community, basically.
That's awesome. And Shaq, to you, what do you do and why do you do it?
Well, hi. So I work as a security culture and awareness analyst at Tide. And essentially, I try to make security awareness fun. So that's by way of comms, awareness content, training, event organisation, anything really, just to try and engage our global employees as much as possible. And I do it because I love working with people. I have a genuine curiosity as to why we do what we do as human beings. So that hand in hand, perfect role for me.
That's awesome. Well, just a huge thank you for taking the time to spend an hour talking all things cybersecurity today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And so I guess just to kick things off, and I'll start with you, Shaq. What do you feel is the current state of play when it comes to security awareness training? Are we succeeding? Are we not? How far do we have to go?
It's a great question. I mean, for me, I think the human to human factor is lost. So security awareness, it's not everyone's priority, and as security awareness professionals, it's our job to know and not assume that everyone will just take on the content and the training that we produce. So most people already practice security best practices every day without a second thought. You know, we lock our doors at night. Why do we do that? We lock our car doors. We hide our PIN when we put our PIN number into the ATM. We watch over our bags and our coats when we're in a club, and we refuse to pay for a cloakroom. So we've been doing this. We do generally have security ingrained in us as people. And whilst organisations give us their basic training, I think what organisations need to do is realise that this training is more life skills. It's not just a matter of training someone to be phishing aware to protect company assets, but actually the training that you give for phishing awareness does help people in their personal day-to-day lives as well. So I guess the question is, how do we help employees to understand that security awareness affects them day-to-day personally, not just in the organisations? And I think, to answer your question, that is due to speaking to people as human beings, having that conversation as we're having now, not just kind of resulting into some remote training somewhere, but, you know, getting people in a room, virtual room, having a discussion and helping to understand where people maybe fall down with regards to security. And so, yeah, that's kind of my stance on it.
That's great. And I do think when we often talk about, you know, dealing with people, we go wrong when we treat people as components and not as, you know, the strongest link. And these are things we'll get to a bit later into the conversation. And so it is about how do we just treat humans like humans and get the best out of them that way. So Kerry, you know, just building on what Shaq was talking about, and you can continue with that line of thought, but also on top of this, you know, why is it that some organizations, you know, still only pay lip service to solve human risk? You know, we can get sucked into tick boxing exercises to meet requirements. And, you know, when there are obviously better ways for achieving and delivering meaningful impact.
So I think part of the problem is this built-in expectation of what security awareness is, because it's been done in a particular way for quite a while. We talk about it in the same way, and I think it's got to a point where that interpretation may have got lost of what it's actually doing, and how to translate that to people in a way. So whenever we talk about things like phishing or what have you, moving people away from things like click rate is actually really difficult, because that's what they come to expect. That's what they like to see. But is it the best? And when you've built in that expectation, that's really then all that they want. But we need to move them forward in the organization, from a security professional in an awareness team to the wider security professional team itself, so the security team, to then the seniors in the rest of the organization, so they can ask the different sorts of questions, so they feel confident to also learn at the same rate, so we can evolve that thinking. So it's not the fact, I find, that people pay lip service as such. People understand that it's there, they know it's important, but they don't have the language around it, or the confidence even maybe in it, to be able to push the boundaries. So we often are then boxed into what, like this, well, it's just a tick box, because that's the most straightforward thing to give people, and it's quite efficient with time and all of those type of things. So there's not a lot of pushing the boundaries, I feel, and I think that's what needs to happen, is to move away from, as you say, that just paying lip service, to actually, what does it really mean for us? How do we make it relatable? And actually, how can we reduce the risk in our organization by paying attention to people and technology and process all, and not seeing them as individual items all of the time, and siloing them away from each other, and actually seeing them connected, and the interconnections that they also have. But that's quite a large task.
It certainly is. And so the idea of pushing these boundaries with the power of language, could you both speak to examples where you've actually, taken on the way that we use language to talk about cybersecurity in the context of awareness, and maybe some of the challenges you faced up against, and some of the breakthroughs you may have found as a result?
Mm-hmm.
That could go to any of you first. Kerry,
so I can speak first. Yeah. So this is something I talk about quite a lot with, and one of the ways is often kind of to go back to what Shaq was saying about like that communication face to face. But I find it with not just the broader community of people in the organisation and all staff, but also those who are in particular roles. So it may be somebody in learning development, somebody in comms, for example, because often you have to go through others as a security awareness professional to get your message out there. So you have to bring them with you in on the journey. So it's not that I have to say everything, write it perfectly. Often you work with copywriters and so forth, but you kind of need to bring them along on why you kind of want to say things in the way that you do. So example, we were doing some stuff with security awareness for the Lego group recently, and they have a copywriter. So I was working with this guy, and he actually said to me, one of the hardest things to do for anybody is to write positively. Everybody can write in the negative relatively easily, but to write positively takes a lot of effort and takes time, because it's not the norm for the average person. And that really struck me, because it is something I've experienced then, and that really validates all of the experiences I've had before, because it's something that as you say, as you introduced me, that's something I believe in and I try really hard to do. But I do find that people struggle, and the way that I do it is to take out a lot of the content. All of the explanations aren't needed about threat and about vulnerability and about these type of things, because that isn't the motivating factor. People just need to know what to do, because the time is precious. So you always have to think of it from that point of view. So what is it that they actually need to do, and how do you tell them that in the most succinct, concise way that makes sense? Well, you kind of need to break it down. So the best example of that from like the work that I did in the team when I was in the NCC with my other colleagues, when we were thinking about it, was like the 3 random words. And that has evolved over time from when we first said it, I don't know, like almost 10 years ago, realistically. But it's only really now that's started to pay attention. But that has taken a long time by being clear, concise, and repeating yourself. But keeping it in the positive, never giving into that negative language, or never giving into all of the naysayers that say, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, and just being clear on what you want to say and why. And then, like I said, slowly bringing others with you.
That's great.
Yeah,
And
I
Shaq, building on that,
couldn't agree more.
oh yeah, go for it.
Hmm. I was going to say
So I was just
apologies,
going
but
to,
yeah,
yeah,
couldn't agree more. In that keeping communication simple, concise, especially when you're working with a global kind of organization, and you're competing for many departments' time as well. So it's not just infosec that requires employees' time and attention. It's the financial crime teams, it's your compliance teams, your product teams, design teams. Everyone wants a piece of our attention and training. So it is about just getting to the point and writing positively. Very valid point, Kerry.
one question that we had that came up from Lisa during this conversation was to have the title, or question B, is security awareness dead? I'd want to hear how you are defining awareness, what all is included in that and what is excluded. So, I mean, obviously this is only going to be touching, the surface of this whole conversation, and it's why we've got this ebook coming out at the end of this webinar. But it really comes down to the fact that in life, there are a lot of things that we are aware of, but don't necessarily change behavior. And so a really great example would be I know not to order pizza every week because it's probably not good for my diet. I know that, but I still do it because I probably get stressed. I'm in a certain environment and I'm at the end of the day. And one of my favorite things to do is sit on the couch, order some good pizza, some wine, and game. That's for me. I know I shouldn't be doing it, but I do. And so it's therefore, how do we create environments where it's not just about being aware of the issues and the situations, it's how we can create, how we can act on it. And so actually, there was one extract I was just pulling up here from the ebook, which talks about, and we'll get to this, and I'll throw it out to both of you now, about the idea of how do we make people uh, care as well as be aware. And I know that Kerry in our pre-chat says she's got plenty to say on this, which I can't wait to hear more about. But going back to like tick box training, it can make people even more complacent. And so there was an article we feature with a great real life example. But the summary is this: that an email arrives and is identified as dodgy by the user, Vicky. Vicky has done the training and a quick look at who it's from, and it shows it's fake. She deletes the email, but she doesn't report it or take any other action. The thing is, she knew what to do, so the training has worked in educating her, but she doesn't take the right actions to make sure it doesn't happen again or to anyone else. Vicky would pass the tick box test and know she didn't fall for the scam, but her behavior hasn't fully changed and her organization still carries more risk than it needs to. So being aware of something and actually have changed behavior to mitigate risk in the long term and with everyone else around you, the total environment, these are different things. And so it's how we go from awareness to actual real behavioral change. Kerry, I am going to jump to you next because of that notion of, making people aware, but doesn't necessarily mean they care. But I know your thoughts are, we have to be careful with this word care.
Yeah, so it's become a word that's used a lot around security awareness, and of course awareness training and education are all different things, all different slices of that pie. But we use these wrappers and across all of them, which is like getting people to care, no matter what element you're speaking of. So to speak to that is that we can't force people to care. I can't make somebody care about anything because it's their personal choice. And I don't know who these people are. What they actually need to care about is their decision, because they may take really what you consider to be risky behavior, but they do that they've thought about it and they do that on purpose. And there's some research that my one of the academics that I'm friends with basically said, did the research said that there were loads of kids and how they use the internet and so forth. And so why did they share? Why did they overshare? And one of the things, all of the kids, they protected their stuff that they would put out there. They locked things down, they restricted access. But there was one that didn't. And they were all not mocking, but slightly like, why not? Like, you need to do this. You need to care about this, this, and this. And the response from the girl was basically, I live a really restricted life from my parents, and my chance to be free is to be free online. So I take the opportunity to open myself up because I'm so restricted in my everyday life. So is that wrong to have that belief? Or not really. That's a perfectly legitimate thought through reasoning. So when we determine things to be care and don't care, what we do is we bucket people into being able to distinguish whether they're good or bad, for example, or us and them. And what we do is we categorize people away from ourselves as, to go back to what Shaq said, to see them as people and to be able to then relate to them and to be able to help them and support them in the ways that they need. So it's fine that somebody might want to share their lives online, but there are elements that you can probably tweak. And how do you then relate to somebody so you give them as much as they may need and in that moment so they can at least, raise it slightly. But if you just take it as in the idea of just don't care, and then you bucket it, and basically then a senior gets hold of that or someone else gets hold of that misuse of the idea has quite a lot of creep around how we make assumptions about people and what they should and shouldn't be doing and who they should and shouldn't be in a workplace. And that starts to become a very difficult conversation.
For sure. And so on that, Shaq, because I know that with your background, you've been involved in content creation, and I know at PeepSec you spoke a lot about how you make content for different platforms and for different audiences. What is your approach to this notion of awareness and caring, with all those things in mind that Kerry just mentioned?
Well, I think that, security awareness is not just an organisation specific requirement. I'm quite passionate about this. And actually, as mentioned earlier, the skills learned are effectively life skills. And I think, again, organisations could go a lot further if they kind of package security awareness as a life skill. And I read recently on LinkedIn, an organisation was thinking about offering security awareness training as a company benefit. And I thought, how interesting. Perhaps it might need some work, and I'm not sure exactly how it would be promoted, but I think as a benefit, that it's pretty cool. It's pretty progressive. It would need to be tried and tested, but ultimately, that's what I think the direction we need to go in as security awareness professionals is less about, humans are our strongest asset. And I can speak for days about that. It really annoys me, that type of statement, but more so just about, here are the skills that we are given to you that will help you in your day-to-day life, that will help you and your family. And that's what I try to do at Tired. It's not just about, you might click on a phishing link at work, which is fine, but you could also get a phishing link in your day-to-day life. You could also get phishing via text message. People will target you or scam you, will try to anyway. And here are the skills that we're giving you as an organisation to protect yourself, your family, as well as your work assets as well. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And were you just saying that humans are the strongest asset is a phrase that annoys you?
So there's a couple that's kind of circulating online at the moment. So humans are our strongest asset, or strongest defense, or the more unpopular one is people are the weakest link. And I just think,
because I was going to say that
what are you saying?
The weakest is what is often perpetuated in mainstream discourse. It's the idea that humans are completely responsible. Mm-hmm. So there is truth to the fact that they're definitely not the weakest. Yes, they're involved often in an organization when security issues occur, but it's not because of them. But are you saying it's therefore not the other way? They can't become the strongest?
It's not that. What I'm saying is, I think language like that just needs to be dropped. Rather than referring to people as assets, you just refer to people as people. I mean, yes, employees definitely offer a strong layer of protection. And therefore, it's almost nonsensical that organisations don't pour more effort and energy into the security awareness space. So that's essentially what I'm saying is going to drop the humans are assets types of lines and just speak to people as people.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. We're being very
And
poetic
also,
right here, Shaq,
it's
because, you know, we're talking about
absolutely.
clarifying language, and you're actually clarifying it right now, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I want to kind of point out as well that it's amazing to see the rise of security awareness professionals, especially in recent years. It definitely doesn't mean that hiring a security awareness professional means job done. It's progressive. It definitely takes your security awareness program that step further, but the individual or individuals still need to be supported, still need to have the capacity to help engage and enrich security awareness across the organisation. So we still got some way to go. Amazing platforms like CyberSafe and various different human risk platforms available to assist with the security awareness programs. But again, how can we kind of instill that human element into our security awareness programs, which I think is the bare basics, speaking to people as people.
That's great. I'm just always giving a slightly delayed pause just to make sure that I don't jump in as someone else starts speaking, and also reflecting on everything being said. Just wanted to say with the chat, we have so many questions coming in, so I want to let you all know that if we're not responding to them now, there is going to be a Q&A section in about 15 minutes time where we'll sort of do a quick fire round going through it. But one that did pop up not too long ago was, and I love this, playing devil's advocate. It comes from Gary, who says, are security training and security awareness two different things?
Well, technically, yes. Yeah.
I love this. Technically, yes. But
Well, it's captured as, this is one of the things to go back to kind of what I said before, because of this expected way of how security awareness is, it does often encapsulate all of those elements, which makes it hard to differentiate between one thing and another. So it looks like it could be just awareness. In actual fact, an awareness professional will be doing training, they'll be doing face-to-face stuff, they'll be doing creative elements, they'll be doing content management, they'll be doing copywriting, perhaps, whoever, marketing, maybe, depending on the skill set of the person, depending on the need from the organization. So it's all of those things. It's about creating connection, realistically. So an awareness person's job is always about creating connection and creating like assets in the truest form of the word for people to help support them. So so people have the right elements of support in the organization, so they know where to go, how to find the information, make the information useful, usable, accessible to people, and all of those other things. So it looks like awareness can often be just tell people as a push activity of just do this because I've told you so. And the training is then backing that up. But in actual fact, there's a lot more mechanics behind that sensibility and that thoughtfulness, actually, to what it means to the organization, is the right time, who else do I need to get involved, all of these sorts of elements of influence that is often missed. So they are definitely two completely different things, but we are kind of, and I know this is an ongoing debate, stuck with the title because it works. And how hard would it be to actually then change the title, and would people know what it is? I mean, that's a debate still ongoing, so yeah.
it was mentioned in the chat by David, who was referring, and I'll actually preface this by saying you are both, and one of the reasons I was excited to work with you both today is because you're both incredibly positive people, and I'm all for positivity in the world. And Kerry, it was picked up the fact that you've mentioned about, in some ways, removing, you know, the reference to the threat and talking, you know, positively about what we're dealing with. But isn't there an argument that people will therefore, to some degree, not engage because they won't therefore understand the threat to themselves? You know, it is a dangerous world out there. I often think about how the internet is an invisible world. You know, you don't see it as, you know, when someone goes in, breaks into your email or takes stuff, it doesn't feel as invasive as someone that's breaking into your home without the physicality there. So is there a responsibility not to scare people, but to say, well, these are real threats? And I'm assuming you're going to say, but there is a positive case of, or a positive method of doing that.
Yeah, basically, you can talk about these things without saying it in that way. It's kind of what I mean. It's not to say that you can't tell people that. So, for example, it's just a type of language. So you can tell people there are certain, even just scams is a softer word than saying threat, or you're vulnerable because of this threat, which is often what you read, or this, that, and what have you. You can play much more with what is out there. So it's not to say that you can't give that information. And then to think about to not over to labour on it as well. So you will often read, almost everything I read says 95% of people are a risk to their organisation. That's not motivating. That's not going to motivate me in the next sentence to actually read any further. So why do we start like that? If you want that information, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you need to get rid of it. But often that stuff is always at the top. That's always the first thing you read, and it doesn't motivate people to read next. It's not to say you need to take it out. It's up to you, realistically. But why is it always at the top? Could it be at the bottom as a read more exercise? Could it be if you are really interested and you really do want to know more, there is all of this, but we need you to take part. We need you to take part to help us and to help yourself. As Jacques says, this is a transferable skill at home and to your kids, and a shareable piece of advice. So this is just generally good practice, and this is what it is. And by doing this, you're helping us, you're helping yourself, and you're learning as you go. And this is about evolving skills and building confidence type of element, instead of laboring on the idea that if you tell people about threat, they're going to do something and they're going to be motivated. When in actual fact, most people, when I tell them what I do for a job, either tell me something deeply sad about something that's happened to them because they are terrified about even interacting with a computer, so they won't even touch it, or the fact that they completely disengage because they're not interested, because it's too terrifying to think of even taking part at all. So that's often the reaction that people have. And you think, well, there's a better way. How do we keep people in the journey? How do we keep them engaged so they can take part instead of disengaging them so they then walk away? Because once they've walked away, it's much harder to re-engage people. So we have to stick to that positive idea, because otherwise, well, we see that now. I mean, that's the issue right now, right? We think people are always fresh and new to this space, and they're not. It's not a greenfield site at all. It's a brownfield site because they've been having this repetitive, random knowledge given to them in slightly varying ways for years. So we have to realize that they've already got an assumed knowledge, whether we know whether they're doing stuff in the ways that we expect or not. I couldn't say. So that would be really hard to tell. So again, how do we tell people different pieces of information in different ways so they don't think it's just common sense and they already know it? So laboring in those ways, which we've already tried, just sounds like they know it, or they get terrified from it. So why not try something different? Like I said, often it's just re-angling stuff. It's not to say you can't have it in there. I wouldn't personally, but that's a personal choice depending on the person. But why is it always at the top? It's always generally the first thing you read. You can put it at the bottom as extra pieces and things like that. Just think about how the content is presented, basically.
It did tickle me when you were mentioning that 90% thing, because I was like, I can just imagine having an inspiration poster on the wall or on my mug. 90% of people are at risk of their organisation, looking at it every day and going, "Oh yeah, wow." But it's a really good way of thinking about it. And you were touching upon the fact that a lot of us do carry language from the past that has framed our worldview. And so a question that we had that came from James, and I'll throw this to Shaq, is the idea that there's this legacy of poor training to now fight against. People may have decided it wasn't for them years ago. Is it important to win back that trust? And I guess I just add to it, like, how do we win back that trust? So when you're working in your space shack, you're not dealing with people that are blank slates that are, okay, this is my introduction to cybersecurity. There's a lot of people that carry legacy issues with the language and the ideas that they're carrying. So how do you tackle that, and how do you make people reframe the way that they approach these issues?
With great difficulty. I'll be completely honest.
Yes.
Because, I mean, we've all worked in organisations where security training is given to you. It's mandatory. It's one of the first things that you do as you're onboarding into a new company. It's the same recycled content, and I'm aware of that. So I try, even though some of the recycled content needs to be there, I try to just make it as engaging, concise as possible, and cater to various different needs. So not everyone, just like if you studied at university or college or whatnot, and you wasn't given a choice of whether you want to do an exam or coursework. It's either or. Point I'm trying to make is that I'm trying to cater to various different attention spans and needs. So some people will engage with kind of that presentation style training. Other people would prefer to have a meeting, a discussion. I think the issue that we have as security awareness professionals is what's the best way of recording attendance and people acquiring the knowledge off the back of the thing that you've put out there. And so I guess we kind of go to the one size fits all, which is the sort of training that where we can record that people have actually done the training and done the tests, but that doesn't necessarily cater to everyone's needs. So what I'm trying to work through is ways of which I can best engage people by, writing different style of comms, whether it is training in a different style, whether it is having that meeting set up every month for people that want to actually drop in and speak person to person. It might be time consuming, but I do think that's the key to helping people along the behaviour change journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lots more questions coming in. I'm going to hold off on the questions just for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll go through this quick fire thing. I guess bringing this all together, security awareness is dead, is provocative, but it is for a reason, because here at CyberSafe, we strongly believe that, security awareness by itself is not enough to change behavior. Some of the things that have been discussed already make me think a lot about some of my time mentoring in schools around digital citizenship when I worked with YouTube. And this is a long-held belief by a lot of teachers in schools that education in the 21st century should not be specifically just about teaching people what to think, but how to think, so that when you're faced with new or the same problem but in different situations, you're not caught off guard. You actually can be a problem solver in real time. And therefore, education really, if it is to be successful, it's about empowerment. And not giving orders, because you can give people orders once, but it's only relevant for that moment. And then actually it creates a sense of reliance. Okay, I will take these actions if I'm ordered again. But there is also space for technology. On the CyberSafe platform, we use nudges and alerts. I have an Apple Watch, which has already bleeped in the last hour, and I didn't stand up when it was asking me to, but it gives me a nudge at the point at which I should take that action. And a great example would be to look at if you are going on a journey that you've never been on before. I could get an A to Z map. I remember those, and sort of plan it and go, okay, I've got to take that turn and go on that road. I know everyone's shrugging and just like, oh, I remember those days. How do we even cope? Have to pull over the side of the road to see where you are and get your bearings. Whereas now you can have Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever you use, or a TomTom. Even TomTom's kind of old school now, right? And you'll be on a journey, and at the moment you have to take a turning off, it will nudge you and say, okay, and that is changing your behavior, but it's a way that's not invasive. And so these two things about empowering and providing orders or nudges or helpful reminders can actually work hand in hand. And so based on that, I just wanted to ask you both, before we go to Q&A, of how do we support people best when it comes to making them more resilient? And I will say it, and I know it's not asset, but become like the strongest link or the strongest person possible at dealing with these risks. What would your top tips be for that? How do we support people best? And I will start with Kerry.
So for me, it's about looking at it at the idea of confidence. So how confident do people feel? And to go to your point of decision making. So one of the things I used to do research in when I was in the NCSC, and one of the areas I'm still deeply interested in, is decision making. How do we understand how people make decisions? Because that influences what people do and then how we need to influence them. Because people make decisions and different decisions all the time, depending on their mood, depending on the time of day, depending whether they've eaten, and all of the randomness that comes with being a human being. So how do we give them the tools and techniques and the skills to feel confident and capable that they can do these things, that they're not put off by like I said, the negative language, they're not put off by the idea that things are too technical, that they can't do, that we break down the elements as much as we can to say, you know what, in this moment, if you feel this, like suspicious, which means, say, for example, and tell them what then suspicious means. So just leaving people, making them feel suspicious. Often people don't know what that means for themselves, but then you can break it down in different ways. You can get them to ask themselves some questions. Is this normal activity? Were you expecting this email, text message, or social media message, or whatever it may be, like phone call or whatever? And ask themselves a couple of questions like that. And if you feel any question, or like threatened or anything like that, if you feel any of those things and your gut is telling you something's a bit weird, something probably is a bit weird. So trust that. And you know what? You can report the email, you can call somebody separately outside of that. Don't do the things that you would normally just naturally trust. There isn't a thing to trust in your gut and trust in what you feel. So building that confidence and validating people to the things that they look, and all of those sensory things that they already experience through their life with, like Shaq said at the beginning, with normal security things that they experience, more in the physical world, bringing that into the real world and think there is a reason why you feel this. There is a reason that this is happening, and this is what you can do. Report something, call the IT services or whoever you may have in your organization, call your friend if you're unsure. Just have somebody to speak to. Just to double check, because once you've done it once and once you go through those questions, and it will take you need to repeat that to be more confident over time and so forth. It's not going to be immediate, but the more you do it, the more intrinsic it becomes and the more instinctive you become at doing it, and the more confident you become at knowing. So finding that place for yourself is really important, but you have to give people a space to learn in that way, as you say, building the critical skills, looking at it from that direction instead of just pushing information thinking it's changing behavior.
And I think from kind of an organizational perspective, what can you do is build an environment where people feel, as Kerry said, confident, being able to approach security teams, build a security community. This is what we do at Tide very well. Someone might report in a open channel, hey, I've received this email, it looks suspicious. And of course, there are ways of which you can report an email officially to our security team. But the fact that somebody kind of wants to share to a wider community their suspicions and the reasons why they think it's suspicious, I think is amazing. A real great step forward in just a rich security culture. So being as approachable as possible, having, again, face-to-face conversations with people. And I know I sound like a broken record, but bringing it back to people, the bare basics, goes a very long way. We're working in a world where everything is remote. We are, more in tune to kind of doing things online. Everything is over Zoom or platform. So being able to have that one-on-one conversation with someone, introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Shaq, and I'm your security awareness culture person. Tell me about your concerns if you have any, or let me show you how you could get the best out of the security training to help you in your personal day-to-day life. Goes such a long way. So that's kind of my one takeaway for organizations. If you take away anything, and there's many amazing things to take away, definitely think about how you can build a rich security culture where people feel comfortable and confident reporting suspicions, because ultimately you can report on phishing metrics. Absolutely, you can click rates, but really what you want to do is you want to report on the fact that people have reported suspicions and feel comfortable doing so.
And the one thing I just add to that as well is is that the thing that helps with that is often people feel really alone when they've done something or they're unsure about something, and it's that feeling alone that allows them to feel shame and guilt, and then it creates inaction and, like, again, that fear factor for them, because they don't know and they don't want to rock a boat. They don't want to make themselves a target anymore because they've already maybe, say, done something that they know may not be right. So you kind of want to get over that. The way that there's a really good talk that Jenny Radcliffe did for Channel 4 actually a while ago about social engineering. And the thing that she says at the end is that the reason why social engineering works is because the kernel is able to make you feel as if you've done something wrong and you feel guilty, and so you don't tell people. And it's that once you start feeling those things, you're less likely to share, you're less likely to do these things, and so they put you in this state, and that means that that threat can evolve, that risk evolves, and so forth, because people, especially around in security, because of all of the language around threat and vulnerable and what have you, it does make people feel really negative. And having worked in a place where being in charge of like phishing, because that's always the example, it's the easiest one to give. When I've received emails from people written in capitals, because even when they're successful and they've had emails telling them successful at reporting phishing, they still write back in capitals, "Why are you doing this to me? Why do I get these emails? I never click on them, but you keep sending them to me. Stop. It is affecting my mental health." I mean, in capitals, I have actually had one of those emails. That is quite a lot to take on board. You have to take that really seriously. They can't be the only ones. So yeah, being really sensitive to, and the idea of then creating those communities and having those conversations and widening that conversation out so people feel able to speak and not have the, that knock-on effect of negativity is really, really important.
You instantly reminded me, a couple of months ago, I was listening on talk radio to, it was an hour speaking about scams, phishing attempts, and the premise was we all kind of know what a fake text is and stuff. Do people really fall for it? That was the premise of it. And there was a young guy that phoned in and said he'd started a new job. He just left a previous job. I think he was on week 3 in this marketing department, and he had an email come through that was from his boss. So he thought, saying, "I need this voucher sorted out. I'll pay you back." It was so in isolation, you'd think, well, that's a bit suspicious. You would just check up on it. But he gave the context, and this is what he was asked about on this show. Why did you do it? He was like, I've just started a new job. I'm very nervous about, job security. The boss has asked me one thing that's really important. I'm not just going to say no from the get-go. And he ended up buying a 100, 200 pound voucher, which he never got back, and he never admitted it. He admitted it on the radio station, but he never admitted it to the boss because of the shame of the guilt. So that's negatively impacted him financially, emotionally, but it's actually impacted the company as a whole, because if he'd admitted it, they could then put safeguards in to react to it. And so, as both of you are saying, it's about one thing, being aware, but it's about how do you nurture a culture in which, kind of how we talk a lot about mental health, for example, how we normalize things. Because when courage is contagious, when people speak out about things that they feel very alone about, and I've had my own experiences on my own YouTube channel talking about issues I've dealt with, you instantly find other people going, "I'm not alone. I went through that," or "I didn't go through that exact experience, but I felt a similar way in this way." And then what you end up doing is collating and amalgamating all these different experiences, which are different pieces of the puzzle, which allow you to create a much better informed and I'd say emotionally regulated environment with where you work. There is so much more we could talk about, and the last 52 minutes have flown by so quick. We should go to Q&As. So we are going to go through these super quick. So what I'll do is I'll just read a question, and then any of you can jump in. This one has come from Val saying, you mentioned earlier senior managers are often fixated on phishing simulation click rates. How do you move them away from that, and to what?
So
who's going to take that?
Yeah, so for me, it's creating, so like with what other metrics you may have, creating a wider look and feel to storytelling with data is probably the easiest way to say it. Now that takes time, that takes skill and development, and a bit of personal probably learning yourself. But the main thing to get over that is having that element and then being really consistent in actually this isn't all and everything. You can give them a click rate, but what else? There is, because there's always asterisk, now it's in a metric somewhere, it has to be ticked green or yellow, whatever it may be that they color it. But it's this may be this click rate, but there's all of this other stuff we've also learned because we have other things to do. So I don't think you will ever move away from click rate. And if you do, often you'll move to report rate. And I don't think either are useful because they're both just single use metrics. Single use metrics on their own can be misused and they don't really mean much generally. But how do you start to change a story so you can feel more confident telling it yourself, so other people believe you? Then you can convince your managers by being confident in influencing them, because as soon as you are confident in your own words, then you can bring others with you. So start with yourself first, I would say, and the reasoning, and then you can start thinking about how to change the conversation.
That's awesome.
And
Shaq, this one's
briefly,
for you from. Oh yeah, go for it.
oh, okay. No, we'll go for another one. It's fine.
No, go on. I insist.
I was gonna say very briefly. I've recently moved away from sharing the click rate in my organisation because I think it just disregards context, the type of simulated phishing one received, when, the time of day they received it, the length of service this person might have had in the organisation, the last time the employee went through security training. There's just so much context that's missing towards that individual figure, and I think it could be quite dangerous. But to what is kind of the main takeaway from the question. Unfortunately, I don't know yet. It's really hard to find human risk metrics to share with organization, with your business leaders and whatnot. So it's a journey. I'm certainly working through it myself, but I just don't find the click rate specifically a helpful metric. But I do find rewarding and celebrating those who've reported a better metric to share.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'll go to this next question to you in a moment, but Nadine had mentioned, aside from training, what specific things do you suggest to increase cybersecurity awareness and improve behaviours? And for this, I'll just quickly go through some of the things that we mention in this ebook. Security awareness is dead or dying, and there's a big piece around creating specific goals, and so that can be specific about each individual behaviour. Stating how this behavior affects security risk, describing the desired behavior change, naming the intervention they believe will lead to the desired behavior change, and cite the research evidence that this intervention is likely to work, and describe how they will measure whether they have changed the specific behavior. If you're not measuring behavior change, you're not reducing risk in a way that is, well, obviously measurable, but is going to be long term. You want it to be done with intention. You want it to be done with a way that can be done at scale. But all of that I went over very quickly, so I will point everyone to the ebook. I'm just going to get one last question. I just want to thank everyone in the chat. The conversation has been so vibrant, so many amazing questions. Can't thank you all enough. This one was from Anne, who says, do you feel that there are certain qualities, backgrounds or qualifications that we as security awareness leads should possess in order to be most effective? Do you want to take that, Shaq?
No. to be completely as in no, I don't think there are a specific qualifications that one needs. I think that you need to be a people person, be able to speak with people on a people to people level, and be passionate and willing to learn. I'm really passionate about this particular topic. I think so. I didn't come from a background of several years of security, and I came in it from a different angle. But for me, I had a willingness to learn, And as I'm learning, everyone else is learning. I think that's a great thing about the security awareness space, is that I am on this journey and I'm bringing everyone else onto the journey as well. So I don't think there's any specific qualifications. There are loads out there that can give you the basics of security. In order to kind of be a security awareness professional, I don't think it's necessary. Might be an unpopular opinion, but quite passionate about this.
That's
No,
awesome.
and I have to say, so
I'm
I
mindful.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say I agree. I don't think you need. I think there are elements that you could, like you say, like keep learning with upskilling in particular areas. Like, so I always suggest things like content design, things like that. To just learn how content is read, so it helps you think about how to frame and make your work accessible. But I mean, those courses you can do online. You can do them free through certain MOOCs on massive online courses and so forth. But just consideration to that, the person and who they are. And the main thing I will say though is, in security awareness, I think a lot of security awareness professionals think they can do everything overnight, but it takes time, and a lot of your job will be about influencing others, both in your management chain, in your security team, and then extended to all of the organization. So thinking about those sort of things on a personal development point of view as well is the way to do it, because you have to be somewhat a little robust sometimes, because people, for example, will want to click rate. So how do you say no in a nice way where they're not going to like bug you too much, and things like that. So considering those things for yourself, but there's no particular overriding thing that, like Shaq says, there are courses, but it's just having that passion and that want to support people.
Shaq, Kerry, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us today for this webinar. It's been an amazing hour. I'm going to give you both about 30 seconds each to answer one final question, which is, if there is one key takeaway you would like our viewers and listeners to take away today, because that's what you do with takeaways, you take them away. What would that be? What is the one thing you'd like them to go away with?
30 seconds. Speaking to people, having that conversation, better understanding potentially what scares people, and how you can best assist them. Building that community, but ultimately speaking to people as people.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's think about your language. So the words that you pick may not be the best for everyone. So how do we get our point across? So, for example, I don't like the word behaviour change because it implies quite a lot, and I don't expect people to change just to be able to be secure. I want to be able to influence them over time. In this, essentially, they will change eventually, hopefully. But in the moment, that's not what I mean. I want them to be able to take part, and I want them to be able to see that they're part of the journey and that they can do things. So sometimes having such what is like strict language and like behavior change all over the place all of the time may not be the best, and just to mix it up a little bit is basically what I mean with the language.
Brilliant. I'm therefore just going to end with a shout out to, if I go to the right slide, our ebook of the same title, Security Awareness is Dead or Dying. This will be emailed to every one of you who is registered for this event, but it will also be available at cybersafe.com. Check it out, give it a read, let us know your thoughts. We always love to hear from the wider community. Shaq, Kerry, thank you so much for your time, and a huge thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. I do like using air meat. This has worked out pretty good. So yeah, great contributions from all over the world. People from New Zealand, South Africa. It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, huge thank you to you all. And there are 2 more webinars coming up this month. We've got one on the 20th, so next week on the Thursday, all about the CyberSafe platform. So register for that if you haven't already. And then we've got one about SebDB on Tuesday, the 25th. You can tell I've got my calendar just to my left, peering over it. But for all things CyberSafe, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And we will see you around. So have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.